The cold years, for 10 long years, she had no warm bed, no soft blanket, no place to rest her head in peace. Every night was the same. Cold ground, broken walls, and a heart that learned to survive by beating slower, quieter, weaker, the alien. Woman was not old, but suffering made her look older. Her skin pale, her body thin, her eyes tired. Each night she curled up on stone floors or inside abandoned buildings, shivering as winds cut through the cracks like sharp knives. Once, long ago, she had family, warmth, and laughter, but war and cruelty had taken everything, leaving her alone, in a city where humans lived in comfort while her kind was pushed into shadows. To the humans, she was nothing but another unwanted alien, someone to ignore, someone to despise, someone to fear. And so, for a decade, she lived like a ghost, moving from corner to corner, never staying in one place, never being welcomed anywhere. Hunger was her oldest companion. Cold was her cruelest friend. Sometimes, she pressed her hands to her empty stomach until the ache faded into numbness. Sometimes, she whispered to herself, just to hear a voice in the silence. But no matter what she did, the nights always stretched too long, too endless, too heavy. For one fragile soul to carry, there were moments when she thought of giving up, to lie down in the frost and close her eyes forever, but something inside, an ember that refused to die, kept her alive. She would whisper, "Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, I will find warmth, I will find kindness." And tomorrow would come, cold, as ever, but she still stood. For 10 years, she had no warm bed, no hand to hold, no home to return to. She watched humans walk past with their children, with laughter, with bags of food and arms full of firewood. Sometimes, she reached out her hand, but the humans turned their eyes away, pretending not to see her, and sometimes they did see, and spat near her feet as if her hunger was a crime, as if her weakness made her dangerous. But this night something was different. The cold had grown sharper, her body weaker, her hope thinner. She could no longer bear another night on the stone floor. Her lips trembled as she walked slowly toward the human district. Her heart pounded with fear. Humans punished aliens who dared cross their streets at night. But fear of death was smaller than fear of freezing in the dark. Her bare feet scraped against gravel, her thin arms hugging her ribs. Each step was a fight, each breath a shiver. She passed tall houses with glowing windows. Through the glass, she saw families gathered at tables, eating warm meals, laughing, sharing stories. The sight burned in her chest, not from jealousy, but from longing. Her people had once known warmth too, and now she had forgotten what it even felt like. The woman stopped before a small human house. It was nothing grand, just stone walls and a wooden door, but from inside came the glow of firelight. She pressed her shaking hand against the door but pulled it back immediately. What if they cursed her? What if they struck her? What if they called others to drive her away? Her knees bent, her strength fading, she leaned against the cold wall, her body trembling. She whispered to herself, "One night, just one night, a warm bed. Is that too much to ask?" Her eyes closed, but her heart pushed her to try once. More if she did not knock now, she would not survive till morning. The thought of dying alone outside, nameless, forgotten, filled her with terror stronger than any human anger. So with the last of her strength, she raised her hand and tapped the door, a weak sound, almost too soft. Yet in the silent night it echoed like thunder in her chest. For a long moment, there was nothing. Her heart sank. Maybe they would not answer. Maybe they already knew who she was and would ignore her. But then footsteps came from inside, slow, cautious, heavy. Her breath caught, her legs almost gave way. The door handle turned, light spilled out, and she covered her face with her arm, afraid of the glare, afraid of the human's eyes. A man stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, his expression sharp with surprise. He had expected a thief, maybe a drunkard, but instead he saw her, small, fragile, thin as a shadow, her eyes wide with fear. For a second, he did not move, and she thought he might slam the door shut. But before he could speak, her voice broke the silence. A whisper, weak but filled with 10 years of pain and hunger. Please, just one night, in your warm bed. The man froze, the words sinking into him like a blade. And in that moment, the woman's fate, whether she would know warmth or return to the cold, hung in his hands. The human's choice. The human man stood frozen at his doorway. The night, wind pressing against his back, the firelight behind him glowing warm. Before him, the alien woman stood trembling, her words hanging in the air like a fragile thread. Please, just one night in your warm bed, she had whispered. Her voice was cracked, weak, yet it struck him harder than any weapon could. For a moment, silence stretched. The man's heart thumped heavy in his chest, his mind torn in two. On one side was fear of what others would say, fear of punishment if neighbors found out he gave shelter to an alien. On the other side was something stronger, something human, pity, compassion, the instinct to protect the weak. He looked at her closely. Her eyes were wide but dim, as if she had seen too much pain, too many winters without warmth. Her arms wrapped tight around herself, her breath clouding the cold air. She looked like she would collapse if he left her outside even for one more hour. She was not a threat, not a soldier, not an enemy, just a broken soul asking for mercy. Go, he almost said, the word rising to his lips. That would have been the safe choice, the choice everyone expected. But then he noticed her feet. Bare and bruised red from frost, he noticed her lips, pale and shaking, trying to hold on to dignity even as she begged. And he realized, if he closed the door, he would be sending her to die. His hand tightened on the wooden frame. Behind him the fire crackled, whispering of warmth, safety, comfort. Before him the cold whispered of cruelty, rejection, and death. He took a long breath, his jaw tense. This was not just her choice. This was his test. Would he be like the others who looked away, or would he dare to be different? At last he moved aside, his voice low but steady. Come in, he said. The alien woman's breath caught, as if she could not believe his words. Her legs shook, and she stumbled forward, stepping into the glow of firelight. The warmth hit her instantly, and she gasped, as though fire itself kissed her skin after years of cold. She swayed, almost falling, but the man caught her arm gently. She flinched at his touch, unused to kindness, but then she relaxed, too weak to resist. He guided her inside and shut the door. The sound of wood closing against the night felt like a shield separating her from death. She whispered, barely audible, Thank you. Thank you. Before sinking onto the rug near the fire, the man stood over her, unsure, his heart still racing. He had done it. He had broken an unspoken rule. If anyone found out, he would be shamed, maybe worse. Yet as he looked at her thin frame trembling, by the fire he felt no regret, only a heavy silence. She pressed her hands near the flames. Her fingers were long but bony, her skin cracked from years of harsh nights. She held them close to the light as if it was treasure, as if she feared it might vanish. Her eyes glistened with tears she tried to hide. For 10 years she had dreamed of this moment. One single night of warmth, and now it was real. The man finally spoke, his voice rough but not unkind. What is your name? He asked. She hesitated, her lips parting, then closing again. A name felt heavy, dangerous. At last she whispered, Leora. Leora, he repeated softly. The name was strange on his tongue, but not unpleasant. He nodded slowly, as though the act of speaking her name gave her existence. For years she had been invisible, nameless to those who walked past her. But tonight, someone had spoken her name, and that alone made her eyes shine. He brought her a blanket, rough but thick. When he placed it around her shoulders, she gasped softly. The touch of fabric was almost too much. After so many years of cold stone, the weight of warmth felt unreal. Her tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She did not sob loudly. She had no strength for that. But the quiet drops falling onto the blanket said everything her lips could not. The man turned away, pretending not to notice her tears. He knew kindness could shame as much as cruelty when pride was broken. Instead, he busied himself with the fire, adding more wood. But his mind raced. What would happen if the neighbors saw? What if tomorrow the city guard came to question him? Outside, unseen, a shadow passed by his window. A neighbor, perhaps, or just someone wandering the night. But the man felt the prickle of unseen eyes. He glanced at the woman, now curled near the fire, her body slowly unwinding from fear. And he knew. This choice would not go unnoticed. Still, he did not regret. For in that moment he realized something powerful. He had not just given an alien shelter. He had given a soul dignity, a chance to live one more night. And deep inside he knew that one night would change everything, but outside whispers were already spreading, and with whispers came danger. The man's choice had saved her tonight, but would it protect her tomorrow? One night's shelter Leora had dreamed of warmth for so long that when it finally wrapped around her, she almost thought it was an illusion. The blanket on her shoulders, the fire crackling before her, the soft rug beneath her fragile frame. It all felt like something stolen from a dream she never believed could come true. Her fingers clutched the fabric tightly, afraid it would vanish if she let go. For the first time in 10 years, the sharp claws of the cold released her body and she felt something close to safety. The man stood near the fire, arms crossed, watching her carefully. He did not trust this moment, not fully. He knew what he had done was dangerous, reckless, even, but as he looked at her, small and trembling, his doubts quieted. She was no threat, just a shadow of a person who had been forgotten by the world. Leora's head grew heavy, her eyelids fluttering. The firelight painted her cheeks gold, and the warmth seeped into her bones. For years her body had slept in fear, jerking awake at every sound, curled tight against the bitter air. Now, for the first time, she felt her muscles loosen. Her breath slowed, her heart calmed. She whispered something, maybe a prayer, maybe just gratitude, before she curled into the blanket. Rest, the man said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of command and care, and she obeyed, drifting into a sleep deeper than she had known in a decade. Tears slipped down her face even as she dreamed, tears of relief more than sorrow. Her body, starved for peace, surrendered completely to the night. The man pulled a chair near the door. He sat with his back straight, his eyes never leaving her. It was strange watching an alien sleep in his home. Her kind had been painted as dangerous, untrustworthy, unworthy of mercy. But what he saw before him was only a fragile creature who had endured too much. He wondered what kind of world forced someone to beg just for warmth. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it faint voices. The man stiffened, leaning toward the window. Two shadows walked past his house, their whispers carried by the cold air. He caught fragments, saw her enter, human's house, not safe. His heart tightened. The rumors had begun already, faster than he expected. This one act of kindness could make him an outcast. He turned back to the sleeping woman. Her lips moved slightly in sleep, whispering words he could not hear. Maybe the names of loved ones long gone. Maybe cries she was too tired to voice while awake. His chest ached, a strange heaviness settling inside him. He did not know why he felt it. Pity, perhaps, or something deeper. But he knew one thing. He could not throw her out no matter what the neighbors thought. Hours passed. The fire dimmed. The man added more wood, careful not to wake her. He studied her face under the flickering glow. Her features were different from humans. Her skin faintly tinted, her ears slightly sharp, her eyes larger than his own. But none of it looked monstrous. If anything, she looked delicate. Too delicate for the harshness she had endured. At some point her body jerked in sleep. Her hands shot out, clutching the blanket tightly, her breath ragged. He leaned forward, realizing she was trapped in a nightmare. Leora, he whispered firmly. Her eyes flew open, wide with terror, her breath rushing as if she had been drowning. When she saw him, she froze, then slowly calmed. Her gaze softened, her lips parted as if she wanted to thank him, but no words came. She only pulled the blanket closer, curling into it as though It was her shield. "You're safe here," the man said, his tone steady. The words were simple, but they landed heavy in her heart. Safe, a word she had not heard in 10 years, a word she had not dared to believe in. She lowered her head, hiding the tears that returned unbidden. The night stretched on. Leora drifted between sleep and waking. Every time her eyes opened, she saw the human still awake, still at the door, still guarding her. It was strange. Why would a human watch over her like this? No one had ever cared if she lived or died, but here was a stranger, treating her life as something worth protecting. At last, dawn began to push against the curtains. Pale light filled the small room. The fire had burned low, but the house remained, warm. Leora stirred, blinking at the unfamiliar glow of morning and safety. For a moment she forgot where she was, then remembered. Her chest tightened with gratitude and fear mixed together. The man stood, stretching his stiff limbs. "You should eat," he said, his voice blunt but not unkind. She blinked, startled. Eat? It had been days since her last meal. Her body trembled with hunger at the mere thought. But before she could respond, a sound from outside shattered the fragile peace. Footsteps. Loud, purposeful. Voices, not whispers now, but sharp, accusing. Someone shouted his name, demanding he come out. The man's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. He looked at Leora, who was clutching the blanket, her eyes wide with fear once more. The warm bed, the shelter, the safety. It had lasted one night, but already the world outside was preparing to tear it all away, the past revealed. The morning air carried unease, heavy and sharp. Outside the man's house, voices echoed, demanding answers. The human, his name was Daniel, stood still, jaw tight, listening. He knew the moment he let her inside, trouble would follow. But he had not expected it to come so soon. Leora clutched the blanket close, her eyes wide. Every sound outside was a reminder of years of rejection, the harsh voices of humans telling her to leave, to starve, to die. Her body trembled as she pressed into the corner. She whispered, almost to herself, "They know. They always know." Daniel turned to her, his voice calm though his hands were tense. "Stay here, don't move," he said. She nodded, though fear made her body stiff. Her eyes followed him as he stepped to the window. Outside, 3 men stood, their arms crossed, their faces twisted with suspicion. Neighbors, men who had watched him for years, men who did not trust anything different. "Daniel," one called, voice sharp. "We saw her, don't deny it. An alien walked into your home last night." Daniel's lips pressed into a line. He did not answer immediately, and that silence was enough for them. Murmurs rose, louder, angrier. "Why would you do this? Why would you risk us all for one of them?" Inside, Leora curled tighter into herself. The words cut deep, familiar wounds opening again. Everywhere she went, the voices were the same. Accusation, disgust, rejection. She had no place, no worth, no right to exist in their eyes. But Daniel turned from the window, his eyes settling on her. He saw the way her shoulders shook, the way her hands dug into the blanket as if it was her only shield. And something inside him hardened. He would not throw her out, not now, not after what she had endured. He stepped back to her, lowering his voice. "Tell me," he said. Her head lifted, confused. "What? Tell me what happened," Daniel pressed gently. "If I am to protect you, I need to understand why you've lived like this, why you've been out there all these years." For a long moment, she did not answer. Her lips trembled, words caught. In her throat, she had buried her story for a decade. Speaking it felt dangerous, as if dragging ghosts back from the dark. But his gaze held steady, not cruel, not curious for gossip, only steady, waiting. And she realized, perhaps for the first time, someone truly wanted to hear. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "My people. We once had homes, families, laughter," she began, her eyes glazed with memory. "I was young, with parents, with a little brother who clung to me every night when the cold came." Her hands tightened on the blanket, pulling it closer as if holding him. But then, the war came, not ours, but we were caught in it. She swallowed, her throat dry. Soldiers came, not just human soldiers, not just alien ones. Armies mixed, fighting for power, not for people. Her eyes lowered, shadows darkening her face. They burned our homes, they tore families apart. They said we were useless, less than dirt. Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out. They killed my parents in front of me. My brother, my little brother, they took him. I never saw him again. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen war himself, but hearing it in her voice was different. Her pain was not just memory. It was a wound still bleeding. She continued, her voice trembling but stronger. After that I ran. I thought someone would help, but no one did. Humans shut their doors. Aliens turned their backs. They saw me as weak, broken, useless. I begged once, long ago, and a man struck me down, said I should die instead of wasting food. Her lips pressed thin, eyes shining with tears. She refused to let fall. So I stopped asking. For 10 years I lived in silence. If they would not see me, then I would become unseen. Daniel clenched his fists. He wanted to tell her it was wrong, that not all humans were like that. But deep down, he knew too many had chosen cruelty. And now, she sat before him, proof of their failure. Outside, the voices grew louder. Someone slammed a fist against the door. Daniel, answer us! Do not hide that thing inside! The sound made Leora flinch, curling tighter into the blanket. Daniel looked at her, then at the door, his mind racing. You survived all of that, he said softly, his voice firm. She blinked at him, surprised. You're still here even after everything. That doesn't make you weak, Leora. It makes you stronger than all of them. Her lips parted, breath caught in her chest. No one had ever said that to her before. For 10 years, she had only been told she was nothing, and now, a human called. Her strong. Her tears finally fell, silently. But these were not just tears of pain. They were tears of release. For once, someone saw her not as dirt, but as something worth saving. Outside, the neighbors shouted again. The time for hiding was almost gone. Daniel stood, his voice steady. I don't care what they say. You are staying here, at least for now. Let them come if they dare. And in that moment, as the pounding on the door grew louder, Leora realized. This man was not just sheltering her. He was standing against the world for her. And that meant danger had only begun. The confrontation. The pounding on the door grew louder, shaking the wooden frame. Dust drifted from the ceiling with every strike. Daniel stood tall, his hands clenched, his jaw locked tight. He knew this moment would come, yet it still sent a chill through his chest. Outside, the voices rose, sharp and accusing. Open the door, Daniel. We know she's in there. She's dangerous. She'll bring trouble to us all. Another voice shouted. Cast her out before it's too late. Leora sat frozen in the corner, clutching the blanket like armor, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. The echoes of their voices dragged her back through years of rejection. Every insult, every kick, every stone thrown at her when she was starving. Her body remembered too well. Fear wrapped around her tighter than the blanket ever could. Daniel looked at her, then at the shaking door. He felt anger boil inside him. Not at her, but at them. The neighbors who called themselves good men yet would drive a starving woman back into the cold. He had lived among them for years, shared food, shared labor. But now he saw their faces clearly. Twisted by cruelty and fear, he moved to the door, standing firmly between it and Leora. You'll stay where you are, he told her, his voice calm. But they... She tried to protest, her voice breaking. Daniel shook his head. No, you're under my roof now. That means you're safe. The door rattled again, another heavy strike. Daniel, do you hear us? A man shouted, open this door or we'll break it down ourselves. Daniel's chest rose and fell with steady breaths. He pulled the door open with sudden force. The men outside stumbled back in surprise. Three of them stood there, neighbors he had known all his life, their faces twisted with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" The tallest one barked. "You let that thing into your home? Are you mad?" Daniel's eyes narrowed. "She's not a thing. She's a person." And she was freezing to death. The men exchanged looks, disbelief and disgust flashing in their eyes. "You don't understand," one hissed. "They're trouble. Where one comes, more follow. You'll bring danger to us all." Daniel stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "The only danger I see is three men threatening a half-dead woman inside my home." Behind him, Leora pressed herself against the wall, listening. Her heart pounded with fear and something else. Something unfamiliar. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever spoken for her. Her chest ached with the weight of it. The tallest neighbor sneered. "You've gone soft, Daniel. You think she's helpless, but they're liars, all of them. They'll bleed you dry, then turn on you." Daniel's fists clenched, but his voice stayed steady. "You've let fear rot your hearts. Look at her, she can barely stand. If she wanted to harm me, she would not be begging at my door." The men muttered, anger still burning. "You'll regret this," one spat. "The others will hear. They won't allow this, not for long." Their footsteps stomped against the frozen ground as they turned away. But Daniel knew this was no victory, only a warning. Whispers would spread like fire, and fire was dangerous when aimed at the weak. He shut the door firmly, bolting it. When he turned back, he saw Leora's wide eyes fixed on him. You didn't send me away," she whispered, disbelief heavy in her tone. Daniel's expression softened slightly. "No, and I won't," he said. His voice carried no hesitation, only resolve. Leora's breath hitched. Her hands tightened around the blanket until her knuckles turned pale. She had expected betrayal, she always did. But this man, this human, had stood against his own people for her. Her throat burned, her eyes blurred. For the first time in years, she felt the smallest spark of hope, yet fear still lingered. "They'll come back," she whispered, her voice low. "They always come back." Daniel met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "Then they'll find me waiting," he said. "And this time they'll learn I don't back down." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. But outside, the cold city was already alive with whispers, neighbors passing stories, twisting truths, spreading fear. By nightfall, the whole district would know. Daniel had taken in an alien. Inside, Leora sat trembling, torn between relief and dread. One night of warmth had turned into something more. A fight, a choice, a bond. And as she looked at him, standing tall and unshaken, she realized her life was no longer her own. It was tied to his. The danger was no longer outside alone. It was inside too, in the fragile trust forming between them. And that trust would be tested soon, harder than either of them could imagine. The defiance. The sun had barely touched the horizon when the whispers grew into something louder. By midday, Daniel's name was on every tongue, his house the center of angry talk. Mothers pulled their children away from his gate. Men muttered threats as they passed. The air itself felt heavy, as though the whole street had turned against him. Inside, Leora sat close to the fire, her hands trembling as she tried to stay small, unseen. Every noise outside made her flinch, the crunch of boots, the murmur of voices, the slam of doors. She wanted to run, to vanish before she brought ruin to the man who had shown her kindness. But her body was too weak, her spirit too tired. And more than that, something inside her did not want to leave. Not yet. Not after she had tasted warmth and heard words of protection. Daniel stood by the window, watching shadows gather at the end of the street. He could see them, neighbors, men he had worked beside in fields, women he had helped carry water. Now those same faces glared at his home as if it were a nest of disease. His jaw tightened, his heart pounding with anger. It was not just cruelty, it was fear, blind and ugly, and he would not bow to it. By late afternoon, the crowd gathered. More than a dozen stood outside his home, torches in hand, though the sun still burned above. Their voices rose together, sharp, accusing. "Bring Her out. You dare shame us by protecting her? She's not one of us. She'll bring death to our doors. The pounding on his door began again, heavier than before. Daniel's hands curled into fists, his breath steadying. He turned to Leora, who sat frozen, her eyes wide with dread. Her lips formed silent words. Don't fight for me. But Daniel shook his head, his voice steady. No, Leora, I won't give you to them. Not now. Not ever. Her eyes filled with tears, silent but bright. For 10 years she had been abandoned, thrown aside, told she was worth nothing. And now here was a man standing against a mob for her. The weight of it pressed into her chest, until she could hardly breathe. Daniel unbolted the door and stepped out. The crowd fell quiet for a moment, surprised by his boldness. Then the shouting rose again. Give her up! She'll poison our town! You've lost your mind, Daniel. He raised his hand, his voice cutting through the noise like steel. She is under my roof, he said firmly. That makes her my guest. And I will not throw out a guest into the cold, the crowd muttered angrily, shifting on their feet. One man stepped forward, his face red with fury. You think you're noble? You think protecting her makes you strong? No, it makes you weak. She's not human. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Then perhaps it takes someone human to remember what mercy is, he answered. The words struck the crowd like a spark to dry leaves. Some gasped, some shouted louder. The tallest neighbor, the same one who had come the night before, pushed forward. His voice was low but venomous. If you keep her, Daniel, you turn your back on all of us. You'll stand alone. Daniel's chest rose, his voice like stone. Then I'll stand alone. Better that than stand with cowards who would leave a starving woman to die. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of a torch. Some shifted uncomfortably, uncertain, but others snarled, their fear twisting deeper into hate. Inside the house, Leora pressed a hand to her mouth, tears slipping free. No one had ever spoken for her like this, not even her own kind. Her heart raced, filled with something she had not dared feel in years. Hope, the crowd shouted again, but Daniel did not move. His stance was unshaken, his gaze fierce. They could threaten, they could curse, but they could not make him bow. At last the leader spat on the ground, his voice hard. This isn't over. You've chosen her over us, Daniel. Don't expect us to protect you when the time comes. With that, the crowd began to scatter, muttering, torchlight fading into the dusk. But the threat lingered, heavy as the cold air. Daniel shut the door firmly, bolting it once more. When he turned, Leora was still staring at him, her face wet, with tears. You risked everything, she whispered. Daniel's gaze softened, though his voice stayed firm. Some things are worth the risk, he said. You've suffered enough. No one should face this world alone. Her chest tightened, her breath shaky. For so long she had been unwanted, unseen, left to starve. Now in this house she had been given something she never imagined. Defense, dignity, worth. Her lips trembled, forming words she could barely speak. Why? Why would you fight for me? Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. Because you're alive, he said simply, and that alone makes you worth fighting for. His words sank deep into her, warming places even the fire could not reach. And though danger still loomed outside, inside her chest something new began to grow. A fragile flame, small but bright, the first sign of belonging after 10 years of cold. But as the night settled once again, Daniel knew the truth. The crowd would return, and next time they would not just come with words. They would come with force. And when that moment arrived, he would have to choose not just to defy, but to fight. A warm bed at last. The night fell heavy over the town. Thicker than before, Daniel kept the fire alive. Every flicker of flame a small shield against the dark outside. He did not sleep, his ears sharp, listening for footsteps, for voices, for the return of the mob. He knew it was only a matter of time. Leora lay curled on the bed he had offered her. The blanket wrapped around her like armor, though fear still trembled in her chest. Every creak of the wooden walls made her flinch. Every gust of wind reminded her of the voices outside, but the bed beneath her was soft, warm, and safe. It was the first time in 10 years her body had touched something that was not stone or dirt. She turned her face into the pillow, tears dampening the fabric, not just from fear but from something else, something new. She had begged for one night, just one, and already she had been given more than she dared imagine. A fire, a roof, a voice that stood against cruelty. And now, this warmth that seeped deep into her bones. But the peace could not last. A sharp knock broke the silence, louder than thunder in the still night. Daniel rose at once, his hand gripping the heavy wooden beam he had kept by the door. Another knock came, then another, and then voices low and hard. "Daniel, open the door. Last warning." Leora sat up, fear striking through her heart. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her body told her to run, to hide, to flee into the cold once again. But her soul refused. She looked toward Daniel, standing strong at the door, and something inside her whispered, "Don't leave him to face this alone." The door shook, fists pounding. Torches glowed through the cracks of the shutters, flames licking. "The night," Daniel's voice thundered back, steady and unbroken. "She stays. She is under my roof. You will not take her from me." A roar rose from outside, anger spilling like fire. "Then you stand against us all." The sound of wood splitting filled the air as the door shook under their strikes. Daniel braced himself, his muscles taut. But before the mob could break through, the door burst open with a force neither expected. Not from them, but from Daniel, who pulled it wide and stepped out into the torchlight. His figure stood tall against the night, his shadow long, his eyes burning. "You call yourselves men," he shouted. "Yet you come with fire and hate for a woman who has nothing. Look at yourselves. You are the danger, not her." The crowd faltered, his voice cutting deep. But anger does not yield so easily. The tallest man stepped forward, sneering. "She is filth, Daniel. If you protect her, then you are filth too." Daniel raised the wooden beam, his voice like iron. "Then I'll be filth. But I'll never be a coward." Behind him, the firelight spilled from the house, and Leora stood in the doorway, her blanket still clutched, but her back straight. Her eyes glistened with fear and strength mixed together. She had hidden long enough, lived unseen long enough. No more. Her voice rang out soft but clear. "I begged only for warmth. I never wanted harm. If you must hate, then hate me alone. Do not punish the one who showed kindness." The crowd shifted, some uncomfortable. Her thin figure in the firelight was not the monster they wanted to see. She was only a woman, fragile, trembling but alive. Alive because one man had chosen mercy. For a long moment silence held. Then, slowly, torches lowered, mutters fading. Not all were convinced, not all were softened, but something had broken in the crowd. The certainty of their hate, they turned away one by one, their anger leaking into the night, until only the tall man remained, his eyes burning with spite. "This isn't the end," he hissed at Daniel. Then he too vanished into the dark. The night fell quiet once more. Daniel lowered the beam, his chest heaving. When he turned, Leora still stood in the doorway, tears glistening down her face. "You should have let me go," she whispered. Daniel shook his head, stepping closer. "No. You asked for one night, but I won't send you back to 10 years of cold. Not now, not ever." Her breath hitched, her hands clutching the blanket tighter. The words sank into her heart, filling the hollow space where despair had lived for too long. Her body shook, but this time it was not from fear. It was from something warmer, deeper, harder to control. Hope. He led her back inside, closing the door behind them. The fire still glowed, the bed still warm. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling as she touched the blanket again. But now it felt different. It was not borrowed warmth, not charity. It was safety. It was belonging. Daniel looked at her and spoke quietly. "You don't need to beg anymore. This is your place now. Her chest tightened, her eyes filling once more. After 10 years of shadows, she had been given light. After 10 years of cold, she had been given warmth. And after 10 years of silence, she had been given a voice that called her worthy. That night, for the first time in a decade, Leora slept not as a ghost, not as a beggar, but as someone sheltered, defended, and seen. And though danger still lingered beyond the walls, inside, she had finally found a warm bed and, perhaps something even greater, the beginning of a new life.